It was a quiet morning, just like any other. The sun had barely risen. The air was still cool, and most people were busy with their usual routines. Streets were filled with the sounds of buses, horns, and footsteps. In one small apartment, a man named Arif sat at his breakfast table, stirring his tea slowly while watching the morning news on his old television. The voice of the news anchor was calm, talking about weather updates and upcoming local events. Everything felt normal, until suddenly the screen flickered. The sound of static filled the room for a few seconds. Arif thought it was just a signal issue, but then the same static noise echoed through his neighborhood. From every house nearby, from every car radio, and even from phones, came a strange, high-pitched tone. Then a robotic voice cut through the silence, deep, slow, and trembling. "This is an emergency broadcast. A human dreadnought is incoming. Collision is inevitable. Seek shelter immediately. Repeat, collision is inevitable." For a few seconds, Arif froze. The cup slipped from his hand, spilling tea across the table. He turned up the volume, thinking maybe he misheard. But no, the same message kept repeating again and again. The words didn't make sense. Human dreadnought? What did that even mean? Within minutes, the entire street was filled with confusion. People came out of their homes asking one another if they heard the same thing. Some looked at the sky as if expecting something to fall from above. Shopkeepers shut off their radios in fear. The words sounded serious, almost like the start of a war. But no one understood what was really happening. At the air traffic control center where Arif worked, the phones were ringing nonstop. His supervisor was shouting orders, asking everyone to stay calm and follow protocol. The control screen still showed normal flight patterns. Nothing unusual in the air, no foreign aircraft, no warnings from military channels. But the emergency alert system had interrupted every frequency, something only the government or a global authority could do. Arif's colleague turned to him and whispered, "Could it be an attack? Maybe a code name for some missile?" But Arif just shook his head. "No idea. But whoever sent this, it's serious." That message didn't come from nowhere. Within an hour, panic had spread like wildfire. Schools began calling parents to pick up their children. Hospitals started preparing for emergencies. People rushed to supermarkets buying water, canned food, batteries, anything that felt useful for survival. News anchors looked pale and frightened, repeating the same alert but offering no explanation. By noon, social media was full of wild theories. Some claimed a massive asteroid was heading toward Earth. Others believed it was a secret experiment gone wrong. A few even said aliens were coming, calling the human dreadnought a code for an unidentified spacecraft. No one could verify anything. The internet was chaotic, filled with fear and fake news. In his office, Arif stared at the communication console. He was trained to deal with emergencies, plane crashes, storms, system failures, but nothing like this. There were no official instructions, no government confirmation, only that single haunting message repeating every few minutes across all channels. He decided to call home. His wife answered, her voice trembling. "The neighbors are saying to go underground, but we don't even know what's happening. Should we leave the city?" Arif took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Don't panic. Stay indoors, keep the doors locked. I'll find out what's going on." Outside, the world was beginning to look different. Roads were jammed with cars trying to leave the city. People were running with bags and children in their arms. Every digital billboard flashed the same emergency line in red letters. "Emergency broadcast, human dreadnought incoming. Collision is inevitable." Arif stepped outside for a moment to breathe. The air felt heavy. The sky looked strangely bright, though there were no clouds. Something about it made his heart race, like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Back inside, the control center received a sudden feed from an international channel. The broadcast showed a blurry image, a massive object orbiting Earth. The reporter's voice was shaking as she said, "According to multiple observatories, an unidentified structure believed to be human-made has broken out of control and is descending towards Earth. Officials are calling it a human dreadnought." The entire room fell silent. The object looked metallic, spinning slowly in space, glowing with pieces of reflected sunlight. It wasn't a meteor. It looked like a massive satellite or space station. The broadcast ended abruptly, replaced once again by the same robotic alert. Arif felt his throat go dry. He turned to his team. If that thing's coming down, it'll re-enter somewhere. Maybe the message means a collision with Earth's surface. But why call it human Dreadnought? His colleague asked. Because we built it, Arif said quietly. That's what scares me the most. As the day went on, the city began to lose power in intervals. Some regions went dark completely. The sound of sirens filled the distance. Police, ambulances, fire trucks, all moving without clear direction. The government finally issued a short statement, confirming that an unidentified object of human origin was on a descending path and that all citizens should stay calm and await further updates. But calm was impossible. People were terrified. Rumors said it would hit within hours. Parents clutched their children tighter. Some prayed in mosques and churches. Some sat silently staring at the sky. A strange unity grew in that fear. Everyone, rich or poor, was waiting for the same thing. An answer. Arif stayed at his desk, refusing to leave. His job was to monitor the airspace, but now the screens meant nothing. Still he watched, out of duty, maybe out of hope. He thought about how fragile everything was. The cities, the technology, the lives built over years, all possibly ending in moments because of one failed creation. Late at night, he finally stepped outside again. The streets were eerily quiet now. No traffic, no laughter, just a heavy silence. A few people stood on rooftops staring at the dark sky. Somewhere far away, a child was crying. He looked up, half expecting to see something fiery streaking through the stars. Instead, he saw only the moon, pale and calm, like it didn't care about the chaos below. At home, his wife called again, asking when he'd come back. Soon, he said softly, though he didn't know if it was true. He didn't want her to hear the fear in his voice. Stay strong. Whatever this is, we'll face it together. After hanging up, Arif sat in the dimly lit control room surrounded by blinking lights and the hum of machines. The emergency alert was still playing softly in the background over and over, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. He whispered to himself, there has to be a mistake. There has to be something we can do. But deep down, a cold truth began to settle in his chest. The message didn't sound like a warning for help. It sounded like a final statement, a confirmation of something already decided. Collision is inevitable. He stared at the radar one more time. No trace of the object yet, but somewhere above, beyond human eyes, it was coming, falling silently through space built by human hands, carrying the weight of human pride and failure. The world had seen wars, disasters and pandemics, but never this kind of fear. This was not about fighting or surviving. It was about facing the unknown. And as the night grew darker, Arif realized something. Maybe the real terror wasn't that the Dreadnought was falling. Maybe it was that humanity had built something so powerful and so careless that it could no longer be controlled. In the quiet hum of the control center, with the faint glow of screens reflecting in his tired eyes, he felt the same dread that millions of others felt across the world that night. Not knowing when or how, or where, but knowing one thing for sure. Something was coming and there was no stopping it. The next morning came with a strange silence. No birds sang, no street vendor shouted, and even the usual noise of the city seemed muted. It felt as if the world had stopped breathing for a moment. People had stayed awake the whole night, afraid to sleep. Every few minutes, the same emergency broadcast repeated on television and radio. The same heavy voice, the same terrifying message. Collision is inevitable. Arif had not gone home. He was still sitting at the air traffic control center, eyes heavy with exhaustion. The floor was filled with people from other departments who had come to help, though no one really knew what to do. Some were checking satellite data, others trying to reach higher authorities, but communication lines were unstable. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. When the morning light entered through the windows, Arif stood up and looked outside. The roads were almost empty. He saw only a few cars moving quickly, probably people trying to leave the city. He took a deep breath and walked to the coffee machine, though he had no appetite. His hands were slightly shaking as he poured the coffee. It wasn't just fear. It was the feeling of helplessness, the thought that something massive was coming and no one could stop it. Around 10 in the morning, the first update came. A message appeared on the main screen of the control center from the National Broadcasting Service. It was short and unclear. It said, "The human Dreadnought is a large experimental satellite. Communication with it has been lost. The object is expected to enter the atmosphere in the coming days. Citizens are advised to remain calm. That was it. No time, no location, no details. Just a few vague lines. But even that small confirmation made people more afraid. Now everyone knew it was real. It wasn't a false alarm or a hacker message. Something was actually falling toward Earth. Within hours, every news channel was talking about it. Reporters looked nervous as they read from their screens. Scientists were invited to give their opinions, but even they seemed unsure. One scientist said it might burn up in the atmosphere. Another said parts of it could hit the surface. No one wanted to sound certain because no one was. On social media, things turned even worse. Some people posted videos claiming they saw something glowing in the sky. Others shared fake clips of explosions. Rumors spread faster than truth. Hashtags like Dreadnought fall and like End of Days began trending worldwide. Fear was turning into chaos. In some cities, people started gathering in open grounds, thinking it was safer than staying inside buildings. Others locked themselves in basements. Some religious leaders called for prayer gatherings, while others said it was a punishment for humanity's mistakes. Arif tried not to get lost in the panic. He focused on his job, checking air routes and communicating with other centers. But deep down, he felt the same fear everyone did. At times, he would stare at the radar screen and imagine that huge metal body falling from the sky, glowing red as it entered the atmosphere. The thought sent chills down his spine. In the afternoon, his supervisor called a meeting. Everyone sat around a table, faces tired and pale. "We've received a report," the supervisor said, "that the Dreadnought is expected to pass above the Indian Ocean region within the next 72 hours. Its path is unstable, but there's a small chance it could shift toward our side." No one spoke for a while. The hum of computers filled the silence. Finally, someone asked, "What are we supposed to do?" The supervisor shook his head. "Our job is to monitor. That's all for now. The international teams are working on it. We'll keep updating flight paths and make sure no aircraft is in danger." Arif nodded slowly. But inside, he knew this wasn't just about aircraft. If that thing truly came down near them, there would be no place safe. That evening, he finally went home to check on his family. The city looked strange. Billboards had turned into warning screens, flashing safety messages. Some shops were closed, others were open but half empty. People moved quickly, avoiding eye contact, as if everyone carried the same silent fear. At home, his wife hugged him tightly the moment he walked in. The children were sitting near the window, looking out at the sky. "Is it true?" his wife asked quietly. "Is something really falling?" Arif didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to make her more afraid. "Yes," he said softly, "but they're working on it. They'll fix it. It won't come here." He sat with his children, trying to distract them with stories, but every few minutes one of them asked, "Will it fall tonight? Or can the sky break?" He didn't know how to answer, so he just smiled and said, "No, nothing bad will happen tonight." That night, as the family tried to sleep, a power outage hit their neighborhood. The darkness made the silence even heavier. From a distance, they could hear faint sounds of people talking on rooftops. Some were praying loudly. The emergency broadcast kept playing on battery radios, its cold voice echoing through the night air. The next morning, Arif returned to work early. The control center was busier than before. Everyone was talking at once. The latest satellite image showed the Dreadnought, a giant, broken structure, spinning uncontrollably above the ocean. Its solar panels had detached and it was losing altitude faster than expected. "Look at this," someone said, pointing at the screen. "It's the size of a small building." Arif felt his heart sink. For the first time, he saw the thing that had been haunting his mind. It didn't look like a satellite anymore. It looked like a wounded beast falling through the heavens. News channels started broadcasting the same image. People all around the world watched it with wide eyes. The object shone like a silver ghost against the blackness of space. Some called it beautiful, others terrifying. By afternoon, more updates arrived. Scientists said the Dreadnought might break into smaller pieces before reaching Earth, but even small fragments could cause serious damage. Governments started releasing safety guidelines. Citizens were told to stay indoors, keep away from windows, and avoid traveling unnecessarily. In the following hours, chaos grew. Some cities faced riots in stores as people fought for supplies. Others had traffic jams stretching for miles. Hospitals prepared for emergencies, though no one yet knew what kind. At the control center, Arif's supervisor looked at him and said, "You should go home to your family." But Arif shook his head. "If this is really happening, I want to stay here. I want to see what's coming." He sat back in his chair and stared at the live feed again. The Dreadnought was getting closer, its orbit dropping every few hours. It felt strange, like watching time run out. That night, he called his wife again. "If anything happens," he said softly, "go to the basement. Don't come outside no matter what you hear." "Will you come home?" she asked. "I will," he replied, though deep down he wasn't sure. "I promise." When he hung up, he noticed most of his coworkers had stopped talking. Everyone was just staring at their screens, faces lit by the faint glow of the monitors. The air felt heavy, thick with quiet fear. Outside, the sky looked darker than usual. The moon was hidden behind clouds and the stars seemed dull. Some people believed the Dreadnought could already be seen, a moving light among the stars. But no one could tell for sure. Hours passed. Every now and then, new alerts came in, each more urgent than the last. But still, no one knew exactly when or where it would fall. In that long, endless night, humanity seemed to hold its breath. People prayed in every language. Families hugged each other tighter. Strangers shared food and comforted one another. The fear that once divided people now made them feel connected in a strange, quiet way. Arif sat in front of his screen, his eyes tired but focused. He realized something. Even though he was afraid, he didn't feel alone. Millions of people were looking at the same sky, hearing the same message, waiting for the same unknown future. And in that moment, the meaning of the words, "human dreadnought," began to change in his mind. It was no longer just a falling object. It was a reflection of humanity itself, strong, ambitious, yet fragile and flawed. A creation that once symbolized progress, now turning into a reminder of human limits. The world waited. The countdown had started, though no one knew the exact time. All they knew was what the voice kept repeating. Collision is inevitable, and somewhere far above the sleeping world the Dreadnought kept falling, silent, burning, and unstoppable. The morning sun rose behind thick clouds, painting the sky in dull gray. It should have been another ordinary day, but the streets were still half empty. People walked fast, carrying worried faces, checking their phones again and again. The fear from the previous days hadn't faded. It had grown heavier, like a shadow that refused to leave. At the air traffic control center, Arif sat in front of his monitor, rubbing his tired eyes. He hadn't slept properly in 2 days. The emergency broadcast was still repeating every few hours, but now news channels were beginning to show something new, a clearer image of the mysterious object. It wasn't just a small satellite or space junk. It looked massive, almost like a huge metallic fortress drifting silently in space. The camera feed from a European observatory showed sunlight glinting off its surface. It had broken parts and floating debris around it, but the structure itself looked strangely human, built by hands, not nature. Arif leaned closer to the screen, heart beating faster. He whispered under his breath, "So this is it. The human Dreadnought." Soon after, a message flashed across all communication networks, an official statement from an international space agency. The announcement began calmly, but everyone could hear the strain in the speaker's voice. The object known as the human Dreadnought was part of a classified global research mission launched several years ago. It was an advanced orbital platform meant for climate observation and long-distance communication testing. However, due to a system malfunction, contact was lost. It has now re-entered Earth's gravitational field, and collision cannot be fully avoided. The exact location of impact remains uncertain. The control room fell completely silent. People stared at one another in disbelief. They finally had the truth, but it didn't make anything better. So it wasn't an alien, not a weapon, not a mysterious creature. It was human. Humanity had built this massive structure, sent it into space proudly, and now it was falling back down uncontrollably, threatening to destroy everything it touched. Arif felt a strange sadness mixed with fear. "We built this," he muttered quietly. "Our own creation is coming to destroy us." As hours passed, more information surfaced. The Dreadnought wasn't just any satellite. It had been equipped with human-like AI systems, advanced machines designed to think, analyze, and operate without direct human control. It was meant to monitor Earth's atmosphere, help prevent climate disasters, and even send data to multiple nations at once. It was built to protect life, yet now it was the biggest danger to it. News channels were filled with interviews from scientists and engineers who once worked on the project. One of them, his voice trembling, said, "We lost contact with it 5 years ago. We thought it had drifted harmlessly into deep space. We never imagined it would come back like this." Social media exploded with reactions. Some people were angry, blaming governments for hiding the truth. Others felt hopeless, saying it was too late to do anything. But a few voices tried to calm everyone down, saying that maybe humanity could still save itself, if it acted fast. At the control center, Arif and his team started receiving new orders. They were told to coordinate with nearby air bases and clear the skies for emergency operations. It wasn't clear what kind of operation it would be, but the tension in everyone's faces said enough. Something big was about to happen. As he worked, Arif couldn't stop thinking about how fragile everything suddenly felt. For years, humans had been proud of their progress, building cities, satellites, and machines that could almost think like people. But now that same progress had turned into a silent threat, falling from the sky. That evening, while the sky turned orange, Arif finally stepped outside for a few minutes. He looked up and thought he saw something faint, a streak of silver moving slowly across the sky. Maybe it was just his imagination, but he felt his heart tighten. Somewhere up there, that enormous metal body was spinning, waiting to fall. At home, people continued to live in fear. Families were packing bags even though they didn't know where to go. Some had left the city entirely, driving toward smaller towns, hoping to find safety. Others stayed, choosing to trust fate. Arif's wife called him again. Her voice sounded tired, but calmer than before. "The children keep asking questions," she said softly. "They saw something on TV about a big ship falling from space. I told them it won't reach us." "That's true, right?" He paused for a moment. "I hope so," he said quietly. "But I can't lie. No one knows for sure." There was silence for a few seconds on the call. Then she said, "Promise me you'll come home before it happens." "I promise," he whispered. "I'll be with you no matter what." Back at the control center, the atmosphere had changed. The fear was still there, but now it had turned into a sort of determination. Scientists from all over the world were working together through live communication channels. NASA, ISRO, and other agencies were sharing data openly, something that rarely happened before. They were trying to calculate the exact point where the Dreadnought might fall. Late that night, a breakthrough came. A retired engineer, who had once worked on the original project, leaked a set of classified design documents online. Within minutes, experts confirmed their authenticity. The documents revealed shocking details. The Dreadnought wasn't just a research vessel. It also contained a set of self-operating systems that could send communication signals and even store human-like voice data. It was as if the machine had a mind of its own. The revelation spread across the world like fire. People began calling it the machine with a soul. Others saw it as a ghost of human ambition, built to be intelligent, now returning home as a reminder of what went wrong. When Arif heard about the leaked documents, he didn't know what to feel. He remembered how people had celebrated the launch of new technologies every year, believing they were steps toward a better future. But maybe, he thought, humans had gone too far, too fast. Around midnight, he received a call from a friend who worked at a nearby observatory. The friend sounded breathless. "We just picked up the latest trajectory data," he said quickly. "If the current path continues, it will pass over the Arabian Sea region in less than 2 days." Arif froze. 2 days? "Yes," the voice said. "But that's not all. The object seems to be transmitting weak signals, like it's trying to communicate. We don't understand the pattern yet, but it's strange." After the call ended, Arif sat silently, staring at his computer screen. He could still hear those words echoing in his head. Transmitting signals. Was the Dreadnought really trying to say something? Could a machine drifting alone in space actually be aware of what was happening to it? He opened the emergency broadcast channel and listened closely to the static. Between the beeps and faint noises, he thought he heard something unusual. Not words, but a rhythm, almost like a broken sentence trying to form. For a moment, it felt like the machine was calling out, not for destruction, but for help. He didn't tell anyone about it. Not yet. He didn't want to sound crazy. But deep down, he started to believe that maybe the Dreadnought wasn't just falling. Maybe it was trying to come home. The next morning, the news spread that global space agencies were preparing a combined mission to intercept the Dreadnought before it entered the lower atmosphere. Teams were being assembled from different countries. Missiles were being prepared not to destroy, but to push it slightly off its course so it could burn safely over the ocean. The world watched closely, holding its breath. For the first time in days, people had a small spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe humans could fix their own mistake before it was too late. But Arif, sitting in that bright control room, couldn't shake off the unease. He remembered the weak signals, the strange pattern in the noise, and the thought that maybe the Dreadnought was more than just metal. It was built with human intelligence, after all. Maybe it had learned more than anyone expected. He looked up at the large screen showing the spinning image of the Dreadnought. Massive, silent, beautiful in a terrifying way. Somewhere deep inside, he whispered to himself, "Please, just let it end peacefully." But far above the clouds, the human Dreadnought kept falling. A creation once born from hope, now returning like a reminder that even the brightest inventions can carry the darkest consequences. And as the world prepared for what was coming, no one yet knew that the Dreadnought still had one last message to send, a message that would shake humanity even more than its fall. The countdown had started. Every news channel, every radio station, and every digital screen in the world now showed the same headline. Final 48 hours before impact. Global teams prepare interception mission. The world had stopped arguing and started working together. For the first time in years, all major nations were sharing data, plans, and even hope. The human Dreadnought, once a symbol of technological pride, had become a common enemy, a threat that could not be blamed on one country alone. At the traffic control center, Arif was sitting at his desk, eyes fixed on the big screen in front of him. The latest updates showed the Dreadnought's path narrowing. Its descent was no longer just a theory. It was happening. The object was spinning faster now, its surface breaking apart as it entered thicker layers of the atmosphere. He could almost feel the weight of every second passing. Around him, the control room buzzed with tension. People were talking rapidly, transferring data, connecting live feeds from space agencies, and monitoring air routes. The mission was simple in words, but impossibly difficult in action. They had to intercept a massive falling object and change its path enough so it would burn safely over the ocean. Outside, the city was eerily calm. People had stopped panicking in the streets. Instead, they gathered around large screens, watching the live coverage quietly, praying, hoping. Supermarkets were still half empty, but now the shelves that remained were untouched. It was as if everyone had realized there was no point in running. Whatever would happen, they would face it together. Arif received a call from his supervisor. "We're being asked to assist the coordination team. You'll help monitor the airspace above our sector during the mission window. Every second will count." He nodded without hesitation. Understood. By evening, the mission plan was finalized. Multiple space agencies, from America, India, China, Russia, and Europe, had prepared synchronized missile launches. The goal wasn't destruction, but diversion. The missiles were equipped with a special technology to push the Dreadnought slightly off its descending path. Even a few degrees of shift could make the difference between a deadly impact and a harmless splashdown in the ocean. The operation was named Sky Shield. It would begin at midnight when the Dreadnought's orbit passed closest to Earth. The hours before the launch were heavy. People across the world waited in silence. Streets were empty, lights dimmed, families huddled in their homes. Even those who didn't believe in prayer found themselves whispering small wishes to the sky. Arif stayed at his station, surrounded by screens and the low hum of machines. Every few minutes, new data came in. The Dreadnought was falling faster than expected. Pieces of it were already breaking off and burning up in the upper atmosphere. But the main body, still massive and intact, continued to descend. On one of the screens, Arif saw the live feed from a satellite tracking it. The image was haunting. The Dreadnought looked like a glowing scar across the dark sky, spinning silently, leaving trails of debris behind. At 11:45 p.m., the first missile systems were armed. The world watched through live broadcasts as countdowns appeared on every screen. 15 minutes to interception, said the anchor in a trembling voice. Arif adjusted his headset and spoke into the mic, confirming air clearance across multiple sectors. His voice was steady, but his heart was pounding. This wasn't just another day at work. This was history being written in real time. At exactly midnight, the countdown reached 0. A bright flash lit up the live feed. Dozens of streaks of light shot upward from different parts of the world, racing toward the same point in the night sky. The world gasped in unison. Children held their parents' hands, old people closed their eyes, and even those who didn't understand what was happening could feel the weight of the moment. Contact in 10 seconds, someone in the control room announced. The streaks of light grew brighter, merging into one glowing pattern as they reached the upper layers of the atmosphere. Then, on the main screen, the Dreadnought appeared, spinning, glowing, massive. 5 seconds. Arif leaned forward, his breath caught in his throat. 3, 2, 1. The sky exploded into light. For a few moments it was brighter than day. The missiles hit their mark, one after another, bursting into controlled flashes around the Dreadnought. The entire room shook with applause, cheers, and gasps. Everyone thought it was over. But then the monitors flickered. A new stream of data appeared and the cheering stopped. The object had shifted. Yes, but not enough. The path has changed, someone said in disbelief, but it's heading straight toward the Arabian Sea. The room went silent again. Arif stared at the data. The shift was only partial. The impact zone had moved, away from major cities, but still dangerously close to coastal regions. Estimated time to entry, 3 hours, a voice reported. Arif swallowed hard. 3 hours. That was all they had. Outside news channels started reporting the updated trajectory. People near the coast began moving inland, though traffic jams made it nearly impossible. The world had gone from celebration to fear again in a matter of minutes. Inside the control room, Arif kept his focus. "We can still make it burn over water," he said. "If it hits the right angle, the ocean might absorb most of the impact." He didn't know if he was trying to convince others or himself. By 2 m. The object was visible to the naked eye. A glowing line appeared across the dark sky, moving slowly but unmistakably. People everywhere stepped out of their homes and pointed upward, their faces pale under the strange light. It looked beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a falling star that refused to fade. Arif watched it through the control tower's window. The glow reflected in his eyes as he whispered, "Please let it fall in the sea." At 3:45 a.m., alarms blared across the control room. "It's entering the atmosphere," someone shouted. "Altitude dropping fast." The screen showed data moving at incredible speed. The Dreadnought was breaking apart as it entered the lower layers of air. Bright flames surrounded it, forming a trail of fire visible for hundreds of miles. Then, something unexpected happened. A faint transmission signal was detected, weak but clear enough to catch attention. "What is that?" a technician asked. "Put it on speaker," the supervisor said. The room went quiet. Through the static, a broken digital voice echoed. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It sounded almost human. "We never meant to harm you." Everyone froze. The words repeated once, and then the signal cut off completely. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of machines. Arif felt goosebumps rise on his skin. He remembered what his friend had said about the strange signals, and now he understood. The Dreadnought hadn't been silent all this time. It had been trying to speak, but there was no time to process it. The impact was seconds away. At 4:37 a.m., the radar screens flashed red. A blinding light filled the horizon. The Dreadnought hit the Arabian Sea with a massive explosion of steam and fire. The shockwave traveled for miles, shaking coastal buildings, shattering windows, and setting off car alarms. Arif grabbed onto the edge of his desk as the room trembled. The lights flickered, and for a few moments everything went dark. When the shaking stopped, he slowly opened his eyes. The main screen showed static. The live feed had been lost. Around him, people were standing still, breathing heavily, eyes wide with disbelief. Outside, the sky glowed faintly orange. The distant sound of waves crashing echoed across the coast. Then, slowly, the glow began to fade. The Dreadnought was gone. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then someone whispered, "It fell in the sea." Another said, "We made it." Relief washed through the room like a gentle wave. People began crying, hugging each other, clapping, praying. Not because they had defeated something, but because they had survived it. Arif sank into his chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. His hands were trembling, but there was a small, tired smile on his face. He looked at the radar screen one last time. The danger was over, but deep inside, he couldn't stop thinking about that final message. "We never meant to harm you." Was it just a random digital echo? Or had the Dreadnought truly tried to speak, to warn, to explain, maybe even to apologize? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. Humanity had come face to face with its own creation, and for the first time, it had felt small. Outside, dawn began to break over the sea. The light of a new day spread slowly across the sky, washing away the glow of fire that had filled it only hours ago. People emerged from their homes, looking up, realizing they were still alive. And somewhere in that relief, in that fragile peace, everyone understood the same truth. The Dreadnought may have fallen, but its message would stay forever. The night after the impact felt endless. The world had gone silent again, but it was not the same kind of silence as before. This one carried exhaustion, disbelief, and a strange kind of calm. The sea had swallowed the human Dreadnought, leaving only a huge column of steam rising into the early morning air. By sunrise, the sky was a dull gray, covered with smoke and mist. From far away, it looked peaceful, but anyone close to the coast could see the truth. The ocean was restless. Waves were higher than usual, and the air carried a strange metallic smell. Ships had been ordered to stay away from the area. No one knew what remained under that boiling water. In the control center, Arif sat quietly in his chair, staring at the last image on the frozen monitor, a white flash just before the feed went out. Around him, people were slowly packing their things, cleaning up the mess from the long night. Empty coffee cups, scattered papers, and silent faces filled the room. The supervisor entered, his voice softer than usual. "You can go home now, Arif. We're shutting down for the day." Arif nodded but didn't move. His mind was somewhere else, replaying the strange voice they had heard before the crash. "We never meant to harm you." That sentence haunted him. He couldn't forget how it sounded, not robotic but broken and full of something that almost felt like regret. When he finally stepped outside, the morning light hurt his eyes. The city was awake again, but not in its usual way. There were no honking cars, no crowds rushing to work. People stood in small groups, speaking in low voices, still unsure if the nightmare was truly over. A shopkeeper near the corner had placed a small radio on the counter, letting the news play. The reporter's tone was calm but heavy. Authorities confirmed the Dreadnought made impact in the Arabian Sea early this morning. No direct land damage reported. Seismic waves were felt along the coastline, but all emergency systems are stable. Experts believe most of the debris has sunk deep underwater. Arif listened for a moment, then kept walking. The air smelled faintly of rain mixed with dust. He passed by a park where children were playing again, their laughter soft but uncertain, like they were still afraid to be too happy. He reached home and found his mother sitting near the window, eyes red from lack of sleep. When she saw him, she stood up quickly. "You're safe," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "I'm here," he said quietly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just stood there listening to the distant hum of helicopters surveying the sea. Later that evening, the city held a community gathering in the main square. It wasn't planned by the government. People just showed up on their own. Some brought candles, others carried small flags, and many simply came to see other faces, to know they weren't alone. Arif went there too. He saw people who had once been strangers now hugging each other, sharing food, offering words of comfort. Someone had set up a large screen showing live images of the ocean. Calm now, except for a faint line of mist near the horizon. A local speaker took the microphone and said softly, "We survived something we never understood." Maybe that's enough for now. The crowd clapped quietly. No one cheered loudly. There was no celebration, only quiet gratitude. For days afterward, rescue teams and scientists worked near the crash site. Drones hovered above the ocean, sending live feeds to research stations. Divers were sent, but they returned with little to report. The seafloor was disturbed, huge craters and scattered metal fragments, but nothing that looked like the main body of the Dreadnought. It had simply vanished beneath miles of water. Then came the strange part. 3 days after the impact, satellite images began to show something unusual in the ocean, a faint glowing circle deep under the surface. It pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. News channels began broadcasting it immediately. "Experts are trying to understand the mysterious glow detected beneath the Arabian Sea," said the anchors, trying to sound calm. "Some believe it's a chemical reaction caused by the heat of the impact. Others think it might be an energy source still active from the Dreadnought's core." Arif watched the coverage, his chest tightening. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear that faint voice. What if the Dreadnought wasn't just a machine? What if there was something alive in it? Or something trying to communicate? That night he sat by his window staring at the dark sky. The stars looked clearer than usual, and for the first time in his life he wondered how many of them might be watching back. He received a call from a fellow technician who had been working in another control center. "You won't believe this," his friend said, voice trembling slightly. "They just found fragments near the shore. They're not metal, not like anything we've seen before. The pieces are warm even after days underwater." Arif's curiosity took over. The next morning he drove to the coastal research site. The air smelled of salt and burnt oil. Dozens of people in protective suits were moving around, collecting samples and scanning the beach. A small crowd had gathered behind a barrier, trying to see what was happening. Arif showed his work ID and was allowed through. Inside, he saw one of the fragments up close, a dull silver shard about the size of his hand, half buried in sand. It shimmered faintly, like light was trapped inside it. When the sunlight hit its surface, small patterns appeared, circular shapes almost like writing, but in no language he recognized. One of the scientists explained, "It's not just metal. It reacts to temperature, maybe even sound. We're still analyzing it." Arif asked quietly, "Do you think it's dangerous?" The scientist shook his head slowly. "Dangerous? Maybe, but not in the way we expected. It's responding, almost like it's listening." That word stayed with him. Listening. Later that night, as Arif was heading home, the wind picked up suddenly. The ocean seemed louder, the waves rougher. He turned to look one last time and saw faint light flickering deep within the water, the same slow pulse seen from satellites. For a moment, he felt something deep inside him shift. The Dreadnought hadn't been destroyed. It had simply gone home, resting beneath the waves. The following days brought mixed emotions. Governments announced that the danger was over. The skies were safe, the ocean calm, and life could return to normal. Schools reopened, markets filled again, and laughter slowly returned to the streets. But people were different now. They spoke more softly. They looked at the sky with new eyes. Some called it humility. Others called it awakening. Humanity had learned that not everything could be controlled. Not everything should be built without understanding. Arif continued working at the control center, but something inside him had changed forever. He began keeping a small journal, notes about the signals, the voice, and the patterns he saw on the metal shards. Not as an official report, but as a personal memory. One evening, as he was writing, he looked at the city lights outside his window. The power lines buzzed softly, a sound so normal yet somehow comforting. He realized that people didn't need to forget what happened. They just needed to learn from it. A week later, the news reported that the glowing circle under the ocean had faded completely. The sea was calm again, and scientists confirmed there was no radiation or threat. The Dreadnought had finally gone quiet. But Arif couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. Maybe it had left something behind. Not a machine, not a weapon, but a message. That night, as he turned off the lights and lay in bed, he whispered to himself, We heard you. Whoever you are, wherever you came from, we heard you. The city outside was peaceful. The world had survived the unimaginable. But deep in the quiet ocean, miles below the surface, a single faint pulse of light blinked once more. Gentle, patient, waiting. No one saw it. No one measured it. But it was there, a silent reminder that the story wasn't finished yet. And though people went on with their lives, something invisible had shifted inside every heart, a tiny thread of awareness that maybe, just maybe, they were not as alone as they once believed. Weeks had passed since the night the human Dreadnought fell into the Arabian Sea. The world had slowly begun to heal, but something deep inside everyone had changed forever. The sky looked the same, the air still carried the scent of life, but people now looked upward with quieter eyes that had seen something greater than fear. Arif often found himself standing near the shore after his work shifts. The ocean waves came and went like whispers, soft but endless. The spotlights and drones were gone now. The sea looked calm, hiding the secret that slept beneath. Sometimes at night, fishermen claimed to see faint lights under the surface, moving, pulsing, then disappearing again. Most people ignored the rumors, saying it was only leftover energy from the wreck, but Arif knew better. He had seen that light before, and deep down he felt that whatever had come from the sky was still there, watching quietly. Life had returned to its usual rhythm. Markets were full again, schools reopened, and laughter had returned to the streets. But in between those moments of normal life, people spoke softly about the Dreadnought, how close the world had come to ending, and how strangely it all had ended, as if the universe itself had decided to spare them. One morning, Arif was called to the central control station again. He thought it was a routine shift, but when he arrived, the room was already filled with senior officials and scientists. Their faces were serious but calm. The supervisor gestured for him to sit. "We've been monitoring deep-sea signals," he said. "Something has changed." Arif leaned forward. "Changed how?" The man switched on a large screen. A soft blue pattern appeared, slow waves of energy pulsing in a rhythmic pattern. "It started 3 days ago," the scientist explained. "At first we thought it was a current fluctuation, but it's repeating every 12 hours, like a heartbeat." Arif stared at the screen. He knew that rhythm. It was the same one that pulsed from the Dreadnought before it vanished. "Could it be debris still active?" someone asked. The scientist shook his head. "No, it's too organized, too deliberate. Almost like it's trying to communicate." The room fell silent. No one dared to say the word alive, but everyone was thinking it. Arif's mind flashed back to that voice they had heard before the impact. "We never meant to harm you." What if that was not just a message? What if it was an apology, or even a warning? That evening he couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, watching the sea far beyond the city lights. His radio was on, playing soft static, when suddenly, a faint sound slipped through. At first it was just a low hum, but then it grew clearer, like whispers buried beneath the noise. Arif turned up the volume, his heart racing. The signal repeated again, broken and distant. "Observe, understand, not destroyed." He froze. The words were barely audible, but they were there. He quickly recorded the signal and took it to the control center the next morning. The others listened carefully as he replayed it. The scientist's eyes widened. "That's not interference. That's intelligent modulation. Someone, or something, is sending that deliberately." The data was sent to multiple research centers for analysis. The results came back 2 days later, confirming what Arif already knew. The pattern matched the Dreadnought's old communication frequency. It wasn't gone. It was awake, but this time it wasn't threatening. The signals carried no danger alerts, no erratic surges, only a calm pulse that repeated one line, as if asking for attention, not fear. The government decided not to make it public immediately. They didn't want panic again. Only a small group of scientists, including Arif, were allowed to monitor it. Days turned into weeks and the signals kept coming, every 12 hours like clockwork. Arif began to notice something else too. The patterns started resembling mathematical sequences, Fibonacci spirals, prime numbers, and cosmic ratios, things that represented balance, not chaos. It felt like a conversation without words. Then one night a new message came through. Not a sound this time, but a visual pattern. a simple glowing shape transmitted through sonar reflection. When the image was processed, everyone in the lab went silent. It was Earth. A detailed outline of the planet appeared on the screen, surrounded by circles and arrows pointing outward, as if showing protection, not destruction. And underneath it, faintly drawn, was something that looked like human DNA. No one spoke for several minutes. Finally, Arif whispered, "It's showing us ourselves." The realization was almost too heavy to bear. The Dreadnought wasn't built to attack. It had come to study, maybe even to connect. Humanity had misunderstood it, panicked, and fought back out of fear. In the following days, Arif became quiet, thoughtful. He stopped trying to explain the signals to others and began simply listening. He would sit by the shore with his small receiver, the waves brushing his feet, as the faint pulses hummed through the device. One night, as he listened, he heard something that made his breath stop. His own voice echoed faintly within the static. "We heard you." The same words he had whispered weeks ago in his apartment, but he had never transmitted them anywhere. He checked the frequency again, but it was gone, replaced by the soft hum that had become so familiar. That moment changed everything. It meant the Dreadnought, or whatever intelligence it carried, and had heard him. It had been listening too. Over the next few months, scientists from around the world confirmed similar signals appearing in different oceans, small, harmless pulses, each sending the same pattern of peace. No one could fully explain how it worked. Some believed the Dreadnought's technology had merged with Earth's ocean currents, creating a kind of living system beneath the sea, a bridge between what was human and what was beyond. Humanity slowly began to change because of it. Nations that once competed for power began sharing research openly. The fear that had once divided people now brought them together. Every broadcast, every discussion carried a single underlying question. What if we are not alone, and what if the others are not enemies? Arif was invited to speak at an international conference a year later. He wasn't a famous scientist or a leader, just a man who had listened closely when others were afraid. Standing before the audience, he spoke in his simple, honest tone. "We were so busy trying to prove we could control everything," he said, "that we forgot how to listen. Maybe what fell from the sky wasn't a warning or an attack. Maybe it was a mirror showing us who we are, and what we could become if we chose understanding over fear." The room was silent for a long time before people began to clap, not loudly, but with quiet respect. After the conference, Arif returned home and walked again to the same beach where it all began. The evening was calm, the water silver under the moonlight. He sat down, feeling the sand cool beneath his hands. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for listening." And somewhere deep below, in the heart of the endless ocean, a faint glow answered, one soft pulse of light that shimmered through the waves, then faded away. He smiled, not with surprise, but with peace. The world had changed forever, not because of war or disaster, but because humanity had finally learned something simple and powerful, that even in the vast silence of the universe, someone was listening back. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight touched the sea, turning it gold. Birds began to sing again, and the city behind him slowly woke to a new day. Arif stood up, looked at the horizon, and felt a deep calm inside him. The story of the human Dreadnought had ended, but it had left behind a message that would live on in every heart. Fear divides, but understanding unites. And maybe someday, when the stars sent another message across the dark sky, humanity would be ready, not to fight but to listen.